Hi, thank you for joining us today for our webinar on electronics management, reducing e-waste through a life cycle approach. My name is Matt Harrison. I'm with the Delta Institute, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization pursuing environmental sustainability and economic development in the Great Lakes region. So before we get started today, I'd kind of like to get a sense of where you all, our audience, are at in terms of today's subject matter: electronics, purchasing, and recycling certifications and registries. So I'd like to know how many of you are familiar with certifications and registries for purchasing and recycling electronics. So I know this is a webinar, and whether you're listening from your home or your office, we are monitoring these responses. We'd really appreciate your participation. So if you could text 246867 if yes, and 342319 if no. Again, how many of you are familiar with certifications and registries for purchasing and recycling electronic products? And if you need a minute, just hit pause on your screen and pick up where you left off. So getting into the subject today, when we talk about e-waste, what are we talking about? We're talking about electronics nearing the end of their useful life, which can mean a couple different things. This can mean electronics that have become obsolete and no longer serve their function. This can mean electronics that are perfectly functional and also are being upgraded to a newer, more modern equipment. These equipment can contain hazardous materials that are known to or thought to cause adverse impacts to human health and ecosystems in certain exposure levels. These include mercury, lead, PCBs, arsenic, cadmium, chromium, and flame retardants. So that's kind of a cast of characters with a lot of adverse impacts. The good news is that they can also contain valuable materials such as glass, plastic, aluminum, steel, copper, and precious metals like palladium, gold, and silver. So why does recycling matter? I'm guessing a lot of you who are participating in a webinar about reducing environmental impacts already are on board with recycling as a way to conserve natural resources, keep harmful materials out of soil, air, and water, and avoid illegal dumping. There's another set of reasons too that might make sense from a business perspective. These include compliance with a lot of state laws that ban landfilling of certain electronic products, and also prevent liability against downstream handling of materials in a certain way. What I'm talking about here is improper dumping and also data security. So that's something that we're going to talk a lot about in more detail later on. So why do registries and certifications matter? The question is, once you've decided that recycling is an important thing to do or a rational thing to do for you or your business, how do you make sure that the values or the objectives of your recycler align with your reasons for doing them? And that's where registries and certifications come in. So today we're going to talk about NAID, R2, e-stewards, and e-PEAT. So these are applicable to purchasing and recycling electronics throughout their life cycle. So it goes from purchasing to recycling, so you can manage it throughout. This shows that manufacturers and service providers are leaders in their areas and adhere to best practices, and it involves verification or audit. So the point of that is that I know that most of us who have made a lot of big purchases, like a car or a new computer, we've probably spent a lot of time trying to figure out the best product that meets our needs. And I'm sure a lot of us also have concerns about social responsibility. So with purchasing certified products, the certification has already ensured that it meets certain criteria, and all you have to do is select a product that meets your needs. So getting into recycling, what we're going to talk about are R2 and e-stewards. R2 is responsible recycling, and e-stewards is the other main certification that's accredited by the American National Standards Accreditation Board. These assess environmental, health, and safety practices. Both of them maximize reuse and recycling, minimize material exposure to human health and the environment, ensure safe management of materials by downstream handlers, and require destruction of data on all electronic devices. So I really want to hammer that point home, that both of them do that. We're going to talk more about ways to protect your data later on, but it's critical to note that. Also, certified recyclers are subject to continued oversight by certifying body. So it's not just a one-off thing. Once they're certified, they have to continually meet the standards of their organizations. So this chart should highlight some of the major differences between R2 and e-stewards. The first is in the the materials they emphasize. R2 is about focus materials that include CRTs and CRT glass, circuit boards, batteries, and items containing mercury. In contrast, e-stewards is about hazardous electronic waste, which basically is all electronic materials. Both plans require environmental health and safety management systems. R2 requires just that a plan is in place, known as an EMS plan, which helps a company, or in this case a recycler, achieve environmental goals by controlling their operations. ISO 14001 is what's required by e-stewards, so it goes a little bit further. And what that is, it's a very specific type of EMS framework under the International Standards Organization for Standardization. So a couple other areas where they differ are export to developing countries. This is permissible under R2 only when it's legal to send and receive for both countries. Again, e-stewards goes a little bit further here, and that is prohibited all the time. On the issue of prison labor, R2 has no position, and again with e-stewards, it's prohibited. Another key difference is the geographic scope of each program. R2 is a national certification, and e-stewards is global. So these differences are significant to some individuals and organizations, and we encourage you to research them to see whether or how they align with your business objectives and principles. But the point here is that these are the two main certification systems. So I'm going to take a minute to show you how you can find certified recyclers in your area and familiarize you with the websites. This is the R2 website, and to find someone in your area, you go to R2 Certified Recyclers. Looking in the Chicago area, click on the interactive map, and it will list recyclers near you. You can click on the flags that pop up for more information, which will take you directly to their websites. e-stewards is set up similarly, and also I'll take this opportunity to tell you that the website is a great place to find more information about them in general, and some of the differences that we just talked about. So this map operates much the same way. Click, find service providers near you, and click for more information. So the next thing I want to talk about is data security, and I said this was a really key concept that we'd be coming back to a couple of times. This is one of the biggest concerns that we've heard over and over again from businesses about retiring electronic equipment. So NAID is an organization for companies that provide data destruction services. NAID is a National Association for Information Destruction, and their mission is to promote information destruction as an industry and the standards and ethics of its member companies. To become NAID certified, companies submit to an initial audit, and then they're subject to certification and review by a certification review board of member representatives and outside security professionals. 50% of certified NAID members are subject to random audits annually. So I also want to take this time to separate the differences between NAID and some of the certifications we just talked about. So again, NAID certifies the practices by which information is physically destroyed. The other two, R2 and e-stewards that we talked about, certify recyclers. So if you want to be extra sure that your data is destroyed and you're achieving the environmental principles outlined by R2 and e-stewards, you can search for a recycler that is both NAID and either R2 or e-stewards or both. And if you live in a big metropolitan area, that probably shouldn't be too hard to do. So when you're recycling your electronics, you can ask your recycler a series of questions to kind of gauge where they're at. You might want to ask them what data sanitation program or processes they use and how many passes it involves. For example, the Department of Defense 5220.22-M refers to the data sanitation method under the National Industrial Security Program, and this is used to overwrite information on hard drives. It generally involves 3 passes where data is overwritten, first with a 0, then with a 1, and then with a random character, and then the overwrites are verified. So these are just examples, but there's a lot more. So these are just ideas of things that you can use to gauge the programs that your recycler uses. You can also ask to receive documentation of the quantity recycled or a certificate of destruction. You can check the documentation provided by a recycler against your own records to make sure that all the equipment and the data it contains is accounted for. If a recycler is not NAID certified, you could ask what security measures are in place, and you might want to ask if you can be present during destruction. Now, even if you don't actually want to be present during destruction, or you don't think that's a good use of your time, the answer they give you could be a key indicator on the transparency under which they operate. So find a NAID certified service provider near you. go to the website, NAID English, for consumers, find service provider, select your state, and it'll give you a list. So this one doesn't contain an interactive map. So the last thing I want to talk about today is EPEAT, and this links back to the lifecycle approach that we're promoting. EPEAT is a tool for reducing e-waste at the point of sale or through the purchasing decisions that you make as an individual or an organization. EPEAT stands for the Electronics Products Environmental Assessment Tool, and it's a registry to identify products with reduced environmental impacts. Currently it includes desktops, notebooks, LCD and CRT displays, thin clients, copiers, faxes, printers, and televisions were added in 2013. To give you an idea of the impact that this tool can have, 120 million EPEAT notebooks, desktops, and monitors were purchased in 2011 throughout the world. Compared to non-EPEAT products, these will eliminate enough mercury to fill 1 million thermometers, save enough electricity to power almost 1 million homes for a year, avoid 9 million metric tons of air emissions, and 16,000 metric tons of water pollutant emissions. That's just the beginning. They'll also reduce the use of primary materials equivalent to 14 Empire State Buildings, reduce toxic materials equivalent to the weight of 266 elephants, avoid disposal of hazardous waste equivalent to 7 Eiffel Towers, reduce greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to 1.6 US passenger vehicles over 1 year. So, EPEAT verification is a two-step process. First, manufacturers sign a contract guaranteeing that they're providing accurate product declarations about the materials used. Those are audited by a committee of experts and evaluated on the basis of a number of criteria. These include those listed on the right, which are product longevity, end-of-life management, corporate performance, packaging, reduction or elimination of environmentally sensitive materials, material selection, design for end-of-life, and energy conservation. On the basis of that, products are rated either bronze, silver, or gold. So here at Delta, we've done a lot of work into trying to understand the barriers that exist towards wider uptake of EPEAT as a purchasing tool, and we've identified a couple of perceptual barriers. First, some people say that the website is difficult to use. I hope to demonstrate in a minute that with a certain level of web savviness, that might not be the case. Another thing people have said is that registrations are not reliable. One of the objectives of this webinar is to show the level of analysis involved in certification and registration of the products and services that we're talking about. We've also heard that not enough products are registered and that registered products cost more. So EPEAT is a tool that differentiates itself as a registry. I want to point that out. It's not a certification system like what we discussed earlier on, R2, e-stewards, and NAID. It's a tool where products are registered. So it's a little bit different, particularly from the first generation of green products. Like back in the day in the 90s when household cleaners that were identified as green were sold in a different section of the supermarket. This is a subset of the exact same products that you'll find in any big box store or online marketplace. And because of that, they're priced just as competitively. So how do you find an EPEAT product that meets your needs? So from the homepage, epeat.net, search the registry. Select your device category, say computers and displays, and select your home country. Do a full search. Say we want a notebook. And here you can select from all the manufacturers that are registered on EPEAT. As you can see, it's a wide selection. In this case, let's compare Apple and Dell notebooks. Select Apple. Select Dell. In the United States. Let's look for gold-rated products of all monitor sizes. So as you can see, there's a number of products registered here. Apple's, Dell's. So you can do a side-by-side comparison of two different products. And compare them against each other on the basis of EPEAT criteria. So as you can see, the registry is fairly simple to use. I'd also like to show you some other resources. If you go to Purchaser Resources, there's Model Contract Language. So if you have contracts or RFPs, you can copy and paste this language directly into the RFP that you plan to use for purchasing. So that's the last demonstration we have today. I'd like to take another text poll before we close. After seeing this presentation, are you more likely or less likely to use certifications and registries when purchasing or recycling electronics? Again, we'd really appreciate your participation, and we are monitoring these responses. You can text 461977 if more likely, 461988 if less likely, and 461989 if no impact. So thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar, and we appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.